Welcome, everybody, to our regular meeting. This is the first meeting of 2017, and I wish everyone a Happy New Year and a prosperous one. This 2017 is going to be interesting from so many angles, not just from watching what happens down south, but there'll be apparently an election here in May, and we'll see what happens here, and lots of projects for Oak Bay staff and council to consider. So it's going to be a very exciting year. So with that, and you may note that we have an agenda, and we, as a standard now, statement on the agenda, and I'll read it out tonight, but this will be the standard agenda item at the top, acknowledgement, which I probably will read out tonight, but then it'll be in written form from here on going forward. That we acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Coast Salish and Strait Salish people. Specifically, we recognize the Lekwungen-speaking people, known today as the Songhees and the Esquimalt nations, and that their historic connections to these lands continue to this day. All right. And we're also video conferencing. With that, I call the meeting to order on that agenda. And our first item of business is number 1, and that is minutes from December the 12th.
Approval?
Moved and seconded. Discussion, please. All in favor? Opposed? No one opposed. Thank you. Special council on December 13th and 2016, and also December 13th and 16th of last year.
Move approval.
Moved, seconded. Discussion. Seeing none, call a question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you. Special committee of the whole, which is a strategic priority session held on the 4th of November 2016.
Move approval.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. None. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Apropos that last set of minutes, remind everyone on council and in the community that we have the continuation of that priority session will happen on this Friday. It's Friday the 13th. That's good luck in many countries. At 1 p.m. in the chambers here. And we will continue the work that we started. The public is welcome to attend. And once the draft is finalized of the priorities, and remembering this is building on priorities that we've had and established before, once we finalize that, then there'll be an opportunity to have a formal public input on that document, and we'll be advertising that in due course. And what we see, there is an agenda item tonight, but it really relates to the prior priorities document. So just so we're all on that same page. Thank you very much. A couple of other little miscellaneous items that bring to people's attention. We got a letter from the coordinator of donor relations up at the Development Office, University of Victoria, announcing that student Ray Goyal has received a scholarship based on the Oak Bay and Saanich Centennial scholarships that were established in our joint centennial year 2006. So congratulations to Ray Goyal. We also are pleased to announce that we received just before Christmas I guess a little Christmas present from UBCM when we were advised that there was a regional community-to-community forum funding approval, which allows us to work again with the First Nations, much like we had already started. This is a small amount of money that allows us to continue, and that is in the amount of $2,500, which allows us to continue that work with the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations, and we're very pleased to hear that and to continue working on that relationship. So, those are all my remarks. Thank you very much. We now have our participation period, which allows up to 20 minutes of time for people to come to the microphone to speak on an issue relating to Oak Bay for up to 3 minutes. We would ask you to state your name and print your name on the speakers list, which is at the microphone. Well, let's first of all, are there any people who are here who wish to speak? Okay, I don't see any, so I don't have to give instructions nor to remind you we're live streaming. All right, thank you very much. We have item number 6, which is a request for a shredding fundraiser. Anyone who's got things at home they wish to have shredded.
Just wanted to let you know I must recuse myself from this item as I sit on the board of the Kiwanis Pavilion.
Okay, thank you very much. So there is a request for a temporary occupancy of the parking lot at Willows Park to collect paper for the shredding fundraiser.
Move adoption? Okay, second.
Okay, moved and seconded for approval. And that would be subject to a series of conditions that staff have recommended. Thank you. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Thank you very much. All right. We have a report from Ms. Carter to do with a tender award recommendation for Public Works Goods and Services. This had to do with an invitation to tender for backhoe and tandem truck rentals, gravel supply, and ready-mix concrete. We have the recommendation there. There were two bids, and the recommendation from our staff who've evaluated the bids is that we continue on with Trio Ready Mix Ltd., who's been a supplier before.
Your Worship, there is a change this year. Last year, our supplier was Butler Brothers. This year would be Trio.
Okay, thank you. All right, I just seem to recall that name. Maybe it was a number of years ago they did some work for us. I don't know. All right. So the recommendation is there that we award the tender to Ready Mix Concrete. Discussions, or first of all, is there any questions? Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah,
Councillor Murdoch.
through you, Chair. Obviously, this is the difference in these two is lower unit costs, higher delivery costs. The break-even is about 2.5 cubic meters. Is that working out? On average, are our deliveries more than that? That works out to be less over the course of the year. Is that essentially the calculation being done here?
So through you, Chair, indeed, what we did was in the past, it was very clear because all the aspects of the bid were lower for one versus the other, and here there was a bit of a mix. So what we did was the average load, the average wait time, and the average size of the load in terms of so volume and frequency. So overall, that's where we got the calculation.
Very good, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I'd entertain a motion, please.
I move the staff recommendation to use Trio Ready Mix.
Okay, thank
Second.
you. Moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. And item number 8, this is consideration of a building bylaw amendment. And you may recall that there was an issue, well, I guess nearly 2 years ago now, that arose on one of our streets with respect to a development where carbon monoxide was released during blasting. And we had a resolution there that, and as you can see that in the report, that in light of the issues arising from that blasting and the release of carbon monoxide, setting out, it was on Woodlawn Crescent, Council directs staff to examine Bylaw 4247, especially with respect to blasting, and report back to Council on any subsequent changes. And you have now before you a report that talks about making these changes, as well as attached to that report is a proposed bylaw. I know I think we received a letter, I think that was circulated to Council on this issue. So we have a number of options. We can accept the bylaw as is and then move through first, second, and third reading, should we decide that. Or if there are issues to do with either the wording or some additions that you want, then I think we would identify what they are, send it back to Council for changing it into looking at the impact first of all, and then recommending what, if any, bylaw change would be required to be implemented to reach those goals. So I think those are the two big options that we have here. So let's see if, first of all, if there's any questions of staff. Mr. Thompson, did you want to go give a brief overview before the questions, or we do have your short report here?
I think it's self-explanatory on
Okay,
the changes.
thank you.
So.
That's what I thought. So did I see some hands? Councillor Selka, Councillor Braithwaite, and then Councillor Murdoch in that order, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. A question for Director of Building and Planning. I do appreciate increasing the insurance. I'm very pleased to see that in the suggested bylaw changes. But I did want to ask, I recall we have a change of process where our permits are now we're required to be posted. This has to do with letting the public know what's going on more than 24 hours in advance. Could you please remind me, with respect to blasting, how much notice do we give the public, number one? And number two, if the public has a concern, is there a piece of paper or a phone number posted or something that they will know where to go and what to do? Please.
The blaster, just like any other applicant that obtains a building permit, would be required to post the permit on the site. And staff are advising them when they pick up their permits that that is a requirement. There are phone numbers on the building permit that they could contact directly to the owner of that permit. And was there a third? Okay. Just those two?
Yeah, no follow-up. Next is Councillor Braithwaite, please.
Thanks. Actually, along the same lines there, through you, Chair. In Mr. Santanon's letter, he did talk about asking staff to provide or require blasting contractors to give adjacent neighbors a pamphlet with contact information. So what you're talking about, Mr. Thomason, is more one piece of paper that's posted at the site. So is there anything that, because I think that's a good idea actually, to have the blasting contractors give a pamphlet around the neighborhood, and I'm not sure if they do that already or if it's something that we could ask them to do.
They are actually required to notify all property owners within 100 meters, or depending on the type of occupancy. If it's a school, then I think if they're within 300 meters, then they have to actually contact the school directly and also provide a letter to them when they're going to be blasting. So the blasters are required to provide that letter to the neighbors, and I think what we can do with that is ask them to include some contact information in the letter. They usually have contact information for their own company, but maybe additional contacts would be prudent.
Good, thank you so much.
Councillor Murdoch, please.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I guess, I mean, I don't have any issue with the intent of this, and it's in terms of the writing of the bylaw, I think it's fairly straightforward. I guess the one issue I had in there was in item number 3 in the report, which is section 24(6). The bylaw requires the blaster to cease operations if there's any injury to property or utilities. And I guess, like all such things, where does this insert us into the process? I guess my concern is that if there's a neighbor that complains that there's, say, a crack in the wall appearing, are we suddenly, as part of this bylaw, now becoming the adjudicator of this, that this is in fact the cause of the damage? What would that liability be? Are we putting a cease work order on there until we determine that, or what that process is? Maybe you could just answer if we should have thought through this piece.
Yeah, I think, well, we would stop the process, and then we would probably have to assess, with the, what the damage is, or whether, I mean, if it's a minor crack or something along that nature, usually it's, directly with the insurance companies that deal with that kind of thing. That is our normal practice, the requirement that the blaster have insurance to cover everything. And the homeowners actually have to contact their own insurance company, because it goes through their insurance company and then they go after the blasting company's insurance company. So it is a civil matter kind of in those instances that we rely on the insurance of the blasting companies and the owners to take care of. But we would, if there is a complaint of damage, then we would cease it until that, because possibly the blaster used too much dynamite or and we would have to make sure that he corrects his measures on how he's doing that.
Okay, and if I may, so just maybe clarify for me then, how does this differ from an existing availability of just a stop work order that we would normally implement? This just
It's not-
essentially gives us a legislative ability to, specific to blasting?
Yeah, it just further enhances that we can stop the process if there's damage, and it's clearly in our bylaw that we can stop it. We did it before. We put a stop work order on when the incident happened on Woodlawn, and we're working through processes on moving forward with them. We thought we had owners' cooperation, but then it ended up that we didn't have the owners' cooperation in that, so it got a little bit messy.
Okay, I think you've answered my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Braithwaite, do you have
Yeah,
any
just
other
to,
questions?
yeah, just to carry on with that, how would you know, through you, Chair, how would you know, Mr. Thomason, if their damage was there, was caused by the blasting? I mean, is there something that's in place that somebody has to show a picture of their house prior to the blasting and after the blasting?
The blasting insurance company actually is required to do a pre-blast survey of properties. So they do actually go and knock on doors and actually do a pre-blast survey.
Good, thank you so much.
And I think quite often that's either videos of the places next door or still photography, so that can compare. Okay, further questions? Councillor Zelka, please.
Thank you, Chair. A follow-up question. One of the issues, and it'll be, I'm not sure which staff member it'll be for, so maybe the CAO could help me figure out who to direct this question. It has to do with emergency management response. For a situation, I'm not sure, while I appreciate all the changes that have been made, I'm not sure whether these changes would have resulted in anything particularly different in terms of what happened on Woodlawn with respect to our potential inability to respond from a corporate perspective in terms of our volunteer emergency services, being able to offer assistance through our normal processes, such as if someone has a fire or someone has an act of God. In this case, it's not an act of God, it's something else, where Emergency Management BC has different regulations around that. So I just wanted to ask whether, number one, to confirm for me, would anything have been different for the Woodlawn situation? And if not, is there something we could do, or is there, yes, I just wanted to simply put the question out there and at least explore whether this actually would resolve anything in terms of how that follows through, please.
I think the person I would have directed that to would have been our fire chief, and he's not here. And I'm going to venture a guess that things wouldn't have been any different. I'm certainly happy to get the criteria in terms of the emergency social services and what their criteria is. I'm not sure that there's, so that we at least have that. I'm not sure if there's anything additional that the municipality should, could, or would do.
Go ahead. Yep.
Final
Same.
follow-up. I would ask if you could possibly get that criteria. I understand from speaking with the chief that there is a little bit of, unfortunately, discretion depending on who answers the phone at the other end, as opposed to being a very specific criteria. And unfortunately, the person who answered the phone in terms of getting all the numbers you need for reimbursement, in this case, said no. Whereas in other cases, it would be yes. So yes, it would be useful to have that nailed down so that a situation like this never occurs again, if possible.
Okay, thank you very much. So yes, Councillor Croft, please.
Through you, Chair. To Mr. Thomason, I'm wondering if you just might speak to Mr. Sultan's second point about granting specific power to the Director of Mailing to require bonds. And I think we might as well address that while we're here. So if you could speak to that item in that letter from Mr. Sultan, I might appreciate it.
Yeah, I don't know how that would actually work, getting a bond. I mean, the insurance companies are the ones that are really covering any damage in that. How much do we ask for in a bond? I mean, damage can vary, from hundreds of dollars to many, many thousands of dollars. And to ask for a bond, just a blanket bond, it's difficult to say. And I don't know whether, I wasn't able to check into the legislation as to whether we can actually require a bond in this situation and what that bond is for and who do we pay that bond money out to. it would get very complicated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Murdoch, please.
Thank you, Chair. What I've heard so far, I don't think I have any issue with the wording that's in this document. I am curious if there's any other similar legislation, bylaws, and other jurisdictions that cover, like situations.
I searched, I think, 30 blasting bylaws and was unable to find any reference to any dangerous gases or anything, because it was an anomaly that really, I don't think that we'll ever see it again myself, but I think it was primarily on the site conditions, in that the house that was built next door was built on blasted rock. They blasted out and placed crushed rock on top of and then built their house. And the blasting had the rock itself must have had some fissures in it, that the blast, rather than dissipating through the air, went into the fissures and then crept through the fissures into the drain tile and up into the dwelling. Very hard to determine that in every case. Certainly when they clean the site for blasting and they're doing the drilling, we can look on the site to see if there are fissures and things like that, but that would be the extent that we can kind of prevent it from happening again. It is such an anomaly. As a matter of fact, that the 2-3 blasting companies that we've dealt with have never heard of this before, like happening in this area.
So my question was really not that, but thank you for that.
Yeah.
'Cause I think it is important that we're not trying to write very specific bylaws to a very specific incident that happened once. I mean, you don't want to get into that situation. So is the wording that's being dealt with here on this, is this consistent with other blasting bylaws that you've found in those other jurisdictions then?
I think it's probably better than most blasting bylaws. As a matter of fact, a lot of municipalities don't even have a blasting bylaw at all. They just allow people to blast.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm prepared to move the recommendation.
Thank you very much. Moved and seconded.
Do we need,
Let's have a discussion on that motion. And so now, the
First- second reading?
recommendation being the first
First reading,
reading,
yeah.
essentially. Thank you. So
I'll
first
move
reading. Okay, it's been seconded. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Second reading, please.
Move second reading?
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Now we have the discussion at the second reading. Seeing no hands. Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. And third reading, please.
Move third reading?
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. This will come back at the next council meeting for final reading and or also called adoption before it becomes law. So thank you very much. And again, thanks to the community for bringing some issues to our attention. And this was, we've had firsts in Oak Bay that we've all been proud of, but this is an unfortunate first, but it's extremely rare. And I think should something like this happen again, now we at least are aware that it can happen, and we have some tools to deal with it. So thank you very much, Mr. Thomason, for putting the report together and the proposed bylaw. Thank you. Number 9, the City of Colwood has written written to the CRD and to the communities about wanting to review certain existing functions. They have a letter in front of us from the Mayor of Colwood where she points out that the certain recent activities call into question why we were paying into the existing functions that they no longer serve the purpose, raising the question of a service review. So you can see what their suggestion is, that their motion was that their staff be directed to investigate the feasibility of initiating a CRD service review. The information be circulated to other municipalities in the CRD. So if I could just start by putting a little bit of context in on this, because it seems that they're starting down a path where they want to review. What I can tell you is that at the CRD, virtually every year that I've been there, there is a service plan provided by each department as to what's going to happen, whether or not there'll be new FTEs, there'll new projects within a particular service, what the new projects entail, what the old projects entailed. And those are worked on by the standing committees. Once they've completed at that stage, they go on to the board for approval and get essentially incorporated into the budget. Because now we know what the departments are doing, what they have done last year, what they're going to do this year, and how that's going to impact the budget. It's a very efficient step process. I don't sit on all the standing committees, but I do sit on the board, and I have not heard that this issue has been raised at any time when the opportunity presented itself, and it presents itself constantly. So that being said, I suppose there's, if there's dissatisfaction in Colwood, they certainly have the right to make this request. So that's a little bit of the context what happens at CRD. I'm going to ask our Chief Administrative Officer, Ms. Koning, to give a little more context on how CAOs work together. We have been told on prior occasions as we were entering into the integrated services review that there's over 100 integrated services throughout. I know the CRD itself has some 200 services it provides, but I know there's an ongoing, if I can call it, efficiency review amongst CAOs, and whether or not that's something that this particular review will be looked at by the group of CAOs. So I'll turn it over to you and give us a little background of how that group works and what, if anything, they might be able to do with respect to this initiative.
So I can tell you that the local area administrators get together, I think it's every 2 months, and we have a list of agenda items, but one of the things that has been worked on, particularly I think over the last, I would say probably 6-7 years, is a good neighbor protocol. I think I brought that to council's attention probably a little over 2 years ago, and it's the 100 items that you're talking about, where there's constant looking at efficiencies, where we can maybe do joint training, where we can do joint policy reviews, where there's efficiencies, where something would actually cross several of the municipalities in the region. So we're always looking for that. That's not only at the administrator's level, we also have that at each of the director's level. Our Director of Engineering has a group that he meets with regularly. We have our corporate officers that do that, our finance that does that. So there's a number of different departments that are also looking at those efficiencies. There are 100 of them, I think, presently. I couldn't name them off the top of my head. Happy to provide them again. We actually also just recently put that forward again when the capital integrated group was looking at efficiencies around the region, so we provided that to them as well. I know that this item has been flagged. Just before Christmas time, I had gotten a call from the administrator from Colwood just to give me a heads up that this would be on the upcoming agenda. What specifically the items of concern are, I'm not aware of those. I leave that with the City of Colwood.
Yes, and I think that over time will become evident. What are the specifics? Certainly not set out in this letter, nor has it been set out and put forward at the CRD table, but no. I assume over the time. So,
but if I could also raise just a couple of other items in terms of looking at action plans. I think the most recent example of an issue that many of the municipalities faced, and that was around the issue of derelict boats, and how each sort of municipality was trying to deal with that issue, particularly on our shorelines. Now that's an initiative that's also being taken up by the CRD, which seems like an appropriate place so that we have a unified action plan, as it were.
And the other point I'd like to make is that how the CRD works. There's certain services that we're in as a CRD that we have no choice. We're mandated to be part of a service. Water is a good example. That we have to be part of the water service at the CRD level. There are many services that are voluntary that communities can move into, move out of. The Regional Housing Trust Fund would be one. Our Royal Theatre would be another one. McPherson, which only has one community in it, is another one. So it may well be then when Colwood starts looking at this, they may see that they want to get out of some services. But I think that's what should happen as opposed to this, CRD-wide review, because that seems to be an ongoing review with the CAOs as it is. But we'll leave that to Colwood. So if there's any other questions, and once that's through, I'd like suggest a motion to receive this letter for information. Thank you. Go ahead, please, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thanks. I think that the CRD does do great work in many things, but I know in the past that I have questioned some of the resources that they ask for, and when it does seem exactly as the letter from Colwood is suggesting, that they're diverting resources from existing functions to support new initiatives. I think that as a municipality, we're very fiscally responsible on our own budget and where our own money is spent, ensuring that we're not kind of double dipping in our existing functions and doubling up or whatever. So I think that it's really important that we also hold the CRD to the same level that we would our own municipality. So I actually would support giving Colwood our support in looking into these into this service review. So that would be my feeling, is that I think that there's nothing wrong with doing this, I don't think. I think that it's, again, fiscally responsible for us to do so.
But it is, just to take up that point, it happens every year. We look at the service plans. So that is an ongoing review. And much like we do here, we go through the budgetary thing. So I don't see the process of what's happening in CRD is different than here. Just the numbers are a lot different. And so I think there is an ongoing review. And I think if there had been some issues raised there, then I would have a cause for concern if they hadn't been dealt with. But it's just a kind of a generalized feeling. And until we see the particulars, I'm not sure we know how to respond to it. But Councillor Murdoch, please.
I'm going to ask some questions, and I may reserve comments towards the end. But my three questions on this one, I don't really know what a service review would look like in terms of what that process is. Is that, if Colwood wants to initiate it, is that something they need to get a certain amount of support for to initiate at the CRD? Is that done from an outside agency? Is that just a request to the CRD I'm curious what the process is. I am curious if this has ever been done. Has there ever been a full, a more thorough service review at the CRD? I tried to find information and couldn't find any information that it has been, but you provided that it's an ongoing process, perhaps not any other process. And I just want confirmation that the CAO from the CRD does attend the administrative group meetings.
So I'm not sure that I can speak for all of those previous questions that are probably better answered by the CRD staff. I can assure you that the CAO from the CRD is at the local area administrators group. But I think that if a municipality has certain concerns or issues about things that they are paying into service delivery, because each of those, as I understand it, are set up by a separate bylaw and has criteria around that they can exercise even just on a specific. They don't necessarily have to have an entire service review. So the initiative then would be on the City of Colwood, because I'm not really sure what specifically the services are that they're referring to. That I don't know. That would have been my first question with the area administrators.
And I don't know what they have in mind for service review. Is it individual services? It's a particular bylaw. But I do remember going to a seminar, one of those newly elected politician seminars, where we had a speaker, Jerry Berry, who talked about a service review that I think had been done up in Nanaimo to the cost of a couple of $100,000. And his advice was, his analysis was, nothing much came of it. So there have been, at least according to him, and I haven't looked at other service reviews, very few that have come out with any particular results. And his recommendation, and as I recall, was you look at the specific services. Do you have a problem with this? And that kind of surgical review, not surgical, I guess in a very pointed, focused review of a particular service may be better than a whole overview. But because the whole overview would be very expensive at the CRD level with their budget. But that's not to say that the CRD may not go down that road. But I think as the Colwood would need to make a case to the CRD and to the constituent members that this is a good thing to do. And we'll see how this plays out. Councillor Ney, please, did you have your hand up?
I think my question is actually being answered. I agree with the CAO that without the specifics of exactly what the problem or the issue was, it's difficult to understand how this is a solution to a problem that I really don't fully understand. So I'm quite prepared to move when the time comes
Okay,
to proceed.
time is now.
Move to proceed.
Thank
Second.
you. Move and second it. Further discussion? Yes, go ahead, Councillor Murdoch, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I guess I have the primary concern I have with the service review is the cost. No doubt it would be expensive, and if you not know what you're trying to achieve, I guess that's the question of whether it's worthwhile. And I would say, you know, my experience with the CRD and all the core services, the sewer and the water and so forth, is that their engineering and other staff have been very capable and very competent and have done a good job on things. I don't see that in those core areas that there's going to be an awful lot achieved. That being said, I will say that all governments, and I mean businesses are the same way, but governments are even more so, they tend to grow, right? Work tends to fill the time available, and people have good ideas and they get implemented, and when they don't no longer need it, they tend to stick around somehow, just sort of living off the side of people's desks and going on. And you know, the CRD is unlike municipal government in that there isn't you know, people being directly held to account in terms of what's happening at the table there. So I think the question I read into this and went back and had a look at the reasons for it was, you know, a concern raised when the request was for, we can do a transportation plan and there will be no cost because we actually found there's a whole bunch of people doing nothing and funded fully, so we can use that money and those people to do it, which raised a very legitimate question. Okay, well, why are those people sitting around waiting for a project to do? If that's the case, should this not be something that we should be trimming? And you know, that does resonate with me. I think that there is a need for us to kind of look at those and make sure that there aren't sort of projects or departments that are going on that are there because they were always there, and the cost of that, I mean, the regional cost for us is 50% of the money that we raise. So it's not an insubstantial amount of money. I don't expect we're going to find huge amounts. To my mind, the advantage of doing a service review is twofold. One, I think it would provide a certain amount of comfort for the general public that there has been a certain amount of due diligence done by elected officials to make sure that the services are being well run, which I think is probably needed because I think there's a bit of a low trust in the CRD in some areas of the public. And two, I think it might give us a chance to have a little bit of a sober look and see what are the services that we want the CRD to provide. There are certainly the core services that you elocuted, and there's a bunch of optional services, but there are a lot of them. There are, you can correct me if I'm wrong, you said 200 services that the CRD provides, and I don't know that we have a good handle that they're all necessarily necessary. So I would actually support this. I mean, at this point, it's sort of a general ask. Are we interested at all in doing a service review? And my personal take is yes. I think we should be interested in looking at a service review. The scope of that to be determined, I think we all have to look at that in terms of what that means. I'd be leery to say, yes, we jump into it. I would like to know more information, but I think in general principles, I'd be very supportive of looking at that. So I'm not going to support the motion because I think that we actually should say we'll support the idea in principle and request more information from them in terms of what they're thinking about, but that say that we're going to be a willing partner if they want to go forward.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Zelka, please.
Thank you, Chair. I will be supporting the motion. For me, the desire to get a handle on a review of the governance, and I understand the governance review process is happening with respect to the A word that shall not be mentioned. I got the feeling there was some question around governance touching on the service. So I'd like to get a handle on what the outputs of that look like before getting into the details and the nitty-gritty of an actual service review. So I will be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others? Councillor Croft, please.
Yeah, through you, Chair, I'll actually be supporting the motion because I can't actually support the resolution as written by the Colwood. I find it somewhat confusing, the feasibility of initiating. I think once they've determined if there's feasible to initiate one, maybe they could come back and talk to us. But at this point, I think we just received their letter.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, Councillor Braithwaite, please.
I'll not be supporting the motion based on the reasons that I stated before, and also I would be in agreement with Councillor Murdoch, some of his reasons as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Good, I'm going to call a question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Braithwaite and Murdoch opposed. Thank you, that passes. Thank you. Go on to item number 10, which is a referral from the CRD regarding the Regional Growth Strategy Amendment Bylaw. We have a report from Ms. Jensen, our planner, and there has been a review of the 2003 Regional Growth Strategy. Was updated in the including things like population projections. There's some new content in here with regards to climate change, a new section on food systems and the like, which is set out in Ms. Jensen's report. I guess the question is for us in something like this is, what, if any, impact does it have on Oak Bay specifically? And us also more generalized are part of being in the CRD. So we have your report, thanks Ms. Jensen, in front of us, and I know you've talked here a little bit about some of the changes and how our OCP, just can you give us a high-level overview and what you see as the impact of these changes to Oak Bay and just generally Oak Bay is part of the Federation?
Thank you. Well, as the report indicates, the CRD initiated this review in 2011. They had originally started with a program to do their 5-year review, which was working towards a new document, the Regional Sustainability Strategy. So the focus was really to up the ante, so to speak, in terms of those sustainability objectives. A number of months ago, the CRD board determined that they wanted to really focus on the growth strategy that they had in place while expanding those key pieces to still focus on the sustainability piece, adding in a number of different new items such as the food strategies and the climate change. So when we review those in terms of the Oak Bay Official Community Plan, as set out in the report, we really have targeted most of the objectives that the CRD is anticipating in their new growth strategy. So from the perspective of the Oak Bay, I don't foresee any specific impacts of adoption of the growth strategy. I think we're already well underway to achieving those objectives through daily routines and through some of the specific projects that staff have been working on. In terms of the greater strategy, there has been some concern about the effects of massaging the growth containment boundary. Council saw a report from staff at the last council meeting with respect to expanding the municipal boundary for Langford in the district of Metchosin, which was supported by council. There was also a suggestion of expanding the renewable resource policy area around the Shirley Jordan River. So really the concerns have been around particularly the western communities and looking at some of the servicing infrastructure. In the grand scheme of things, I think the CRD has come up with a fairly balanced approach in terms of looking at the core municipalities and the options available to accommodate growth to 2038 as compared to looking at the western communities and the existing development that's out there and how do they continue to ensure safety and services and any moderate expansion that might be out in that area. So as it stands, I think the growth strategy is supportable.
Thank you very much. Let's see if there's any questions of Ms. Jensen or other staff. Go ahead, Councillor Nate, please.
Really a comment. Thank you
No,
very
questions, and then we can, once there's a motion, then we can talk about comments and debates, if you don't mind. Please and thank you. Councillor Zelka, questions, please.
Thank you. Chair, question for the manager planning. You suggest that there'll be very few changes in our bylaws or approach, I don't, other than in the OCP, where we have to add food systems and climate action objectives. We only have one farm, but we do have community gardens. I'll sort of take a few questions one at a time. What do you see happening with respect to food systems, please? Just if you could, what's the word for it? Guess?
Well, I do believe that I don't see there's a huge difference in terms of Oak Bay, in terms of any full-scale agriculture that's going to take place in the municipality. But we do have a number of objectives set out in the official community plan that look for opportunities for urban agriculture. So we have had inquiries over the years looking at opportunities to expand the community gardens that are set out in the parks, for example. So is there an opportunity to take a look at developing that program further?
It's a general question I've got for many of these statements, and I'm just picking on food systems as an example. So if we choose to ignore these objectives, what's the result? Just out of curiosity, and are we legally mandated to follow these objectives? I just wanted to understand where they fall in the grand scheme, because I know provincial legislation we have to follow, our bylaws we have to follow, but these things, I don't know where they fit. Is it just policy, or is it more than that?
Well, if I may, there actually is a requirement that's set out in the end of the report where our official community plan contains a regional context statement, and that is really intended to show how our official community plan links with that growth strategy. How are we going to follow those objectives? Most of them are already in that regional context statement. The additional two pieces were the climate change and the food systems. And I would suggest that we already have those pieces in the community plan. What we'll be required to do now, if the growth strategy is adopted, is to update that context statement to show that we are in alignment with their policies.
Proceed, yep.
Just in supplemental. Thank you. Since we aren't, Colwood, or we're not Machosen, we're very different. So I understand that statement sort of just indicates how we can follow the objectives, even though in some cases many of these don't necessarily apply. So I think I understand that particular statement is really more of a setting out of a policy in terms of how we're going to do our best. It's a best effort approach. I just wanted to understand again, how legally mandatable is this?
Well, I would suggest that both of our community plan and the growth strategy, you're correct. They set out objectives, they set out policies. There's no regulatory framework per se. However, it is anticipated that each of the municipalities would follow the strategy, the objectives that are set out in the growth strategy. So from the OCP perspective, from Oak Bay perspective, we do have those objectives in place. We do have policies in place. Some of them are general in nature, so we wouldn't be looking, to go back to your example of food systems, we wouldn't be looking at food systems. We wouldn't be looking at full-scale agriculture. We wouldn't be looking at private managed forest lands, but rather what's applicable to a core municipality.
Continue, yes, please.
And final, thank you very much. I'm very pleased to hear that. And I must say the actual detailed list, the table 1 mentioned in your report that actually comes out of the CRD thing, reads in some ways, in many ways, I believe, aligns fairly closely with many of our strategic objectives. I'm very pleased to see suggestions to link density increases to provision of community amenities. I'm very pleased to see conservation and stewardship of streetscapes, and support upgrades and retrofits of older heritage homes as a way of helping with housing affordability. I'm very pleased to see, and even on the greenhouse gases, how in many ways our urban forest strategy may actually be a part of our, I imagine, strategy to meet that climate action statement. I just wanted to ask a director of planning, did I get a manager of planning? Did I get the gist of it? Is that essentially what you're trying to say?
I believe so.
Cool. Okay, any other questions? All right, now, I do have a question is, what happens if we accept, what happens if we reject, or we just receive for information? Just remind us of the need for unanimity for regional growth strategy change.
There is provincial legislation set out that should a municipality choose not to accept the growth strategy, the province would become involved to work with the disputing municipalities to find an acceptable balance that the growth strategy would be adopted.
And what's the process if one is not able to find a common ground?
I believe they keep working on it until you do.
I think, okay. Okay. I thought at some point changes can be subject to arbitration and, yeah, all right. All right. So, what is the desire of council, having heard Ms. Jensen?
Move the recommendation.
Second.
Thank you very much. And that is that accept the RGS bylaw and direct staff to notify the CRD of that. Thank you. Moved and seconded. Further discussion, please. Councillor, now, Councillor Ney.
I guess my comment really is just thank you very much, through you, Chair, to Ms. Jensen. Thank you for the report. And what I especially like is the effort you've made to identify objectives in the OCP that we developed with our community and demonstrate to us how they are in alignment with the regional growth strategy. It's reassuring, but it's also helpful to show how we've managed to align ourselves, but in a way that is tailored to the values and the landscape of our jurisdiction. And I think that's very confirming for our community. And I think also, as I read some of the comments later on in the minutes of the APC, it might be a nice sort of table to distribute to members there as they struggle to work towards communicating to the community about why we're embarking on some of the initiatives and that we are. Because I think this shows that very clearly. So I really just wanted to thank Ms. Jensen for the report and the organization of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Murdoch, did you have something to say? Yep.
Just last
Go ahead, please.
comment, yeah, it was just, I mean, I think the fact that this is an amendment to the existing regional growth strategy simplifies the approval quite a lot. I just want to acknowledge the fact that, you know, at the CRD, this has been contentious a little bit because of it really comes down to whether to use the water servicing as a rural constraint. And I will say that in my opinion that this does strike a reasonable balance. I agree with the Director of or Manager of Planning on this one. I think that there's enough allowance there to allow those communities to thrive and develop and so forth locally, and still keep a reasonable constraint on urban sprawl. So I'm quite happy to support the motion.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. We on item number 11, please. This is someone who wants to give us money. The Victoria Foundation, actually not us, but wants to give the Heritage Foundation money, a grant of $1,179. It just has to come through us for bookkeeping and legal reasons. So
Move approval or move the recommendation.
okay, and that is to do that we receive the money and essentially credit it to the Heritage Foundation. Thank you. Moved and seconded. Discussion. Councillor Murdoch and Braithwaite, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just my question is really, this is an annual process that happens in perpetuity. The money was given to the Victoria Foundation by the Heritage Foundation, and then they get a grant back every year in perpetuity. So this will happen every year, forever. Is there any way we can delegate this authority to staff so that we doesn't have to come to council every single time and have a report written up?
Through your worship, yes, I believe that is possible.
Is it a simple motion we can make here, or is it something that you would prefer to draft? And
We could certainly look into it and bring that information back for you.
okay, I'll look at maybe doing a notice of motion and putting something forward. Thank you.
On the other hand, it's the same report. We just change the numbers every year. So and so just a few minutes here at council saying yes, yes. Go ahead, Ms. Koenig, please.
I think that maybe staff can add it to a list of our next round of efficiency issues.
Oh,
when
yes,
we do
thank you.
that.
That's a
That'd
good
be
idea.
sufficient. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor
That was
Braithwaite, we're going to say
actually
the same thing?
Exactly the same thing,
Okay.
yeah.
No other comments? All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. We have a series of annual reports and minutes. The first one is the Oak Bay Heritage Commission report, 2016 annual report. And there's a recommendation that we receive it.
Move receipt.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Yes, go ahead, please, Councillor Nave.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. I quite appreciated the report done, I guess, prepared by the chair. There are a number of fairly loud recommendations coming out of and actions coming from the commission, and I really wouldn't want to lose them. And some of them are really action focused, and I have no doubt that these come forward after a great deal of thought, and we have some very experienced people on the commission. And I'm just wondering, my question is to council, is there's suggestions about how there's some bolded action items here that I think they're trying to communicate something here to the council. And I'm just not, I think that at some point we may want to discuss the viability or whether the council wants to move forward with some of these. So my point really is just I don't want to lose sight of those, and if somebody has some idea about how to keep that on the table, keep it alive.
Right. I know on this Friday when we discuss our priorities, one of the things we'll be discussing is a protocol for how we put things on the table, such as the ones you're referring to, and so how they get considered. So that might be, once we've discussed that protocol, that's something that you could use in order to bring forward some of these action items, either as part of the protocol or as part of the next go-around for priority setting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Is there any other hands? Yes, Councillor Zelka, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm intrigued with Councillor Nay's suggestion, and after we approve this, I would consider supporting a possible referral to the priority session of these ideas, if council so chooses. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. The train hasn't arrived. Has left the station of priorities, but it hasn't arrived at the next station. It's en route, I guess. And the question is, how do we meld those in there together, or do we do it this year, do it next year? But we'll wait for your motion on that. So the motion right now is to receive the annual report. Any other comments? Go ahead, Councillor Murdoch, please.
I think it's probably incumbent upon me to say something as liaison. The annual report is very well appreciated. I thought it was well written, and a lot of the bolded and non-bolded recommendations and so forth in here are largely operational pieces. There are recommendations of how staff can kind of, how we can use a contractor possibly, or use some other bit more heritage focus within our building and planning processes. They're related to maybe moving us away from being so reactive and being a bit more proactive on heritage pieces, which would be a balance of staffing and commission pieces. None of those are simple, and they're all, I think, all well supported by council and principal. So, the priorities is probably a reasonable place to sort of talk about that in terms of, we can't probably give specifics because I don't think we're there, but I think we could get some more information and just reinforce perhaps to staff the importance of where that is on terms of the heritage as a feature and housing retention as a priority and so forth. And that lens, I think, is probably the key thing, but it's very hard. There aren't a lot of sort of, let's do this one project, aside from the heritage conservation area, which is sort of underway. And I think it looks like we're looking at using that as a stepping stone to apply those things, right, to sort of build some of our heritage processes and so forth as part of that. So as we're spending money on that, we're doing it so it's repeatable and so forth. So I think the report is good, and I think the comments made here are very well taken and probably well appreciated by the Heritage Commission and Foundation, because I think they look for that level of support from staff and from us.
Okay. Any other comments on the annual report being received? Seeing none, call a question. All in favor? Against? None against. Thank you very much. Now, yep, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. If you would allow me, I wish to move a motion to refer the annual report to the, what's it called, the strategic priority session that occurs this Friday.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Discussion? All, yes, go ahead, please.
Yes, the discussion that I wanted to raise, the reason why this is important to me is that we have only 29 homes on the Oak Bay Community Heritage Register, which for me is an embarrassment, that we have so few houses with a district that is as old as we are. And while it might seem new today, I have a feeling that many of these have been around for a long, long time. So that's why I'm trying to move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor
Mr.
Hay.
Mayor, thank you. The reason I would support this motion is because some of these, my sense is that this commission is working very hard to try to make heritage preservation in this community more effective. And they've been very thoughtful here. And some of the action items are like about hiring or contracting out heritage expertise from other communities. Whether that's necessary or usable, I'm not sure, but they're looking for ways to strengthen our practices and policies and align them with provincial legislation. And to move this agenda forward, there's some other very specific things here as well around changing some of the language in the registrar. And my sense is this is worthy of a discussion with council and consider whether any of these recommendations are worth pursuing in this year. So I'll support them.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Murdoch.
As far as I can see, this is essentially taking this report and including it in our package on Friday, and we can bring it up as needed. So it's very hard to argue against that.
Okay. Going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. And I take it staff will have a look at how these things are going to fit in to the current status of our priorities, but also to how many of them are, I think you referred to them as kind of operational items that will be worked on regardless of whether or not they're part of the priorities. All right, so we look forward to Friday to discuss that too. We next have the Heritage Commission minutes of November the 8th
Move
of last
receipt.
year.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. The next one is item, let me just make sure I'm on the right one, 14. And these are the Advisory Design Panel minutes of December the 6th.
Move receipt.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Next is the Advisory Planning Commission minutes, and that's December the 6th also.
Move receipt.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. And now we have the update of our prior strategic plan, the quarterly update. We have a report from our Chief Administrative Officer and as well as the attached strategic plan.
Move receipt.
Moved. Seconded. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. There's no correspondence to be received. The new business, item 18. There's no report from the Capital Regional District. We have a planning committee, or first inaugural meeting this Wednesday. We'll set the, at that point, the terms of reference for the committees, but there's no other significant work right now on that agenda. Other verbal reports. Yes, go ahead, please.
Just a quick one. As council is aware, the Cenotaph Committee has produced a design. Actually, I'm not. Some of you may not know that, but they've come to the end of a piece of work on that committee and produced a design landscape plan for the Cenotaph landscape, and we'll be discussing this at our strategic priorities, whether council wants to move up forward. But I just wanted to bring to attention of council that you can review the design plans before the strategic priority, and the plans are they're quite large, so, and they are in the council cupboard there at the top shelf if you want to review them. Okay, but they're the only sets, so do take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other new business or reports? I don't see any. Thank you very much. We'll go on to number 19, which is a resolution, because we left off Councillor Croft's name for the South Vancouver Island Prosperity Project, but she's been our representative, and it's just more a typo
Move that
than
Councillor
anything.
Croft be appointed for the year.
Thank you.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. And now,
Move adjournment.
Second.
moved adjourned. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for attending our first meeting of 2017, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.